Number 1. Containment. This strategy was all about stopping the spread of communism, like plugging holes in a sinking ship. Created by U.S. diplomat George F. Kennan, containment aimed to keep communism where it was, hoping that the Soviet system would eventually collapse under its own weight. Containment wasn't just talk, it led to some serious military action. In Korea, U.S. forces fought to push back North Korean communists. And in Vietnam, the U.S. backed the South against the Communist North, sparking one of the most controversial wars in history. The idea was simple: stop the dominoes from falling. But the result? Decades of conflict and a Cold War that touched nearly every corner of the globe. Containment became the backbone of U.S. foreign policy, driving interventions from Europe to Asia and beyond. It was a strategy that defined the Cold War, showing just how far the U.S. would go to keep the world from turning red. Number 2. Brinkmanship. Next, let's talk about brinkmanship, a strategy that's basically international chicken, but with nuclear weapons. Under President Eisenhower, the U.S. decided to play tough, pushing the Soviets to the brink of war to make them back down. The idea? Show you're crazy enough to push the button, and your enemy will think twice. The Cuban Missile Crisis was the ultimate brinkmanship moment. Soviet missiles in Cuba, U.S. ships in the water, and the world holding its breath. For 13 days, we were on the edge of nuclear war. But in the end, both sides blinked, and a deal was struck: no missiles in Cuba. And the U.S. quietly removed its nukes from Turkey. Crisis averted. Brinkmanship was a risky game, but it kept the Cold War cold. It was a strategy of nerves, where both sides had to look tough without actually pulling the trigger. And it worked most of the time. Number 3. Mutually Assured Destruction, MED. Now here's a strategy with a terrifying name: Mutually Assured Destruction, or MED. The idea? If both the US and Soviet Union had enough nukes to wipe each other off the map, neither would dare start a war. It's like having two gunslingers, each with a finger on the trigger, knowing that if one shoots, both are toast. By the 1960s, both sides had enough nukes to end life as we know it. The logic of MED was simple but terrifying. Any nuclear attack would be met with overwhelming retaliation, leaving no winners. This grim reality kept both superpowers from pressing the big red button, even as they built bigger and deadlier arsenals. MED kept the peace, but at a price. It created a world where everyone lived under the shadow of nuclear annihilation, a constant reminder of just how close we were to the edge. Number 4. Proxy wars. When you can't fight directly, you fight through others. Enter proxy wars. Instead of duking it out in Europe, the superpowers picked battlefields far from home, backing different sides in conflicts from Vietnam to Afghanistan. Vietnam was a classic proxy war. The U.S. supported South Vietnam, while the Soviets and Chinese backed the Communist North. The result? A brutal, drawn-out conflict that left deep scars on both Vietnam and the U.S. in Afghanistan. The roles reversed: the Soviets invaded, and the U.S. armed the Mujahideen. Another long, bloody war, with the locals paying the highest price. Proxy wars were the Cold War's shadow battles, where superpowers clashed without ever facing off directly. These conflicts often left nations devastated, showing that even indirect war can be incredibly destructive. Wow, what a journey! We just scratched the surface of Cold War strategies, and there's so much more to explore. If you're into this kind of content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay in the loop. And hey, if you're ready for more Cold War intrigue, check out our next video on Top 10 Cold War Spy Operations. It's full of secrets and surprises that you won't want to miss. Number 5. Detente. Let's talk detente, fancy French for easing tensions. After years of playing chicken, both the US and the Soviet Union realized they needed to chill out. Enter detente, a strategy to relax the Cold War's grip on the world. Detente led to some big moments, like President Nixon's groundbreaking visit to China in 1972. This move opened up diplomatic relations with China, shifting the balance of power. Then there were the SALT treaties, where the superpowers agreed to limit their nuclear arsenals. Baby steps, but steps nonetheless. While detente didn't end the Cold War, it was a crucial shift towards dialogue over destruction. It showed that even in a tense world, diplomacy could still win out. Number 6. The space race. Next up is a strategy that took the Cold War beyond our planet: the space race. This wasn't just about exploring the cosmos. It was about proving which superpower was superior in science, technology, and ideology. The stakes? Global prestige and the ability to show off who had the best rockets. The space race kicked off when the Soviet Union launched Sputnik in 1957, the first artificial satellite to orbit the Earth. This was a wake-up call for the U.S., which responded by ramping up its own space program. The Soviets scored another win by sending Yuri Gagarin, the first human, into space in 1961. But the U.S. landed the ultimate punch with the Apollo 11 mission in 1969, when Neil Armstrong took that one small step on the moon. The space race wasn't just about exploration, it was a high-stakes competition to prove who was on top. The space race showcased the Cold War's technological rivalry. It wasn't just a battle for space, it was a battle for hearts and minds around the world. In the end, it helped push technological advancements that we still benefit from today, from satellites to GPS. Number 7. Economic aid and influence. Let's shift gears to a more subtle but powerful strategy. Economic aid and influence. During the Cold War, both the U.S. and the Soviet Union used economic aid as a tool to gain allies and spread their influence. It was all about winning hearts and minds, not with guns, but with money. The Marshall Plan is a perfect example. After World War II, the U.S. pumped billions of dollars into rebuilding Western Europe, ensuring these nations stayed capitalist and friendly to America. This wasn't just charity, it was a strategic investment to create a buffer against Soviet influence. Meanwhile, the Soviets were doing their own thing, providing economic and military aid to countries in Eastern Europe and the developing world. From Cuba to Ethiopia, Soviet aid was a way to gain allies and expand their sphere of influence. This strategy wasn't just about cash, it was about creating long-term dependencies and alliances. By tying countries to their economic aid, both superpowers ensured they had loyal friends in key regions, turning economic support into political power. Number 8. Psychological warfare. Finally, we've got psychological warfare, a strategy that aimed to mess with the enemy's mind. This wasn't about bullets or bombs. It was about propaganda, misinformation, and cultural influence. Both the U.S. and the Soviet Union used psychological warfare to undermine each other's credibility and win the hearts and minds of people around the world. On the American side, there was Voice of America, a radio station that beamed news and entertainment into the Soviet bloc, promoting the benefits of capitalism and democracy. The idea was to show people behind the Iron Curtain that there was a better way of life beyond communism. The Soviets weren't slouches either. They had their own propaganda machines, spreading messages that painted the U.S. as imperialist aggressors bent on world domination. This war of words was fierce, with both sides using media, literature, and even film to spread their messages. Psychological warfare wasn't just about convincing the enemy, it was about shaping global perceptions. Both superpowers understood that the Cold War wasn't just fought on the battlefield, it was fought in the minds of people around the world, and in this battle, influence was just as important as firepower. Number 9. Espionage and intelligence gathering. Last but definitely not least, we got espionage and intelligence gathering, a strategy that brought the Cold War into the shadows. This was the era of spies, secret missions, and high-stakes intelligence operations. Both the U.S. and the Soviet Union relied heavily on espionage to gain the upper hand, learning about each other's plans, technologies, and weaknesses. From the CIA's covert operations to the KGB's network of informants, both sides had entire agencies dedicated to spying on each other. Think about the famous U-2 incident, where an American spy plane was shot down over Soviet territory, or the Berlin Tunnel operation, where the West tapped Soviet communication lines. These intelligence operations were crucial, not just for gathering information, but also for keeping the other side in check. And let's not forget the double agents who played both sides, like the notorious Kim Philby, who fed secrets to the Soviets for years while working in British intelligence. And that's a wrap on Cold War strategies. From nuclear brinkmanship to diplomatic breakthroughs, these strategies shaped the world we live in today. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and press the bell icon. And if you're ready for more Cold War intrigue, check out our next video on the secret operations of the CIA during the Cold War. Trust me, it's packed with jaw-dropping revelations.